how do you build relationships with words as a leader is you connect to the audience. So I have positive intent. I use words towards my priority. Then I find a way that we connect.
So you're not just talking about what you want to talk about.
That's right.
You're talking about what is relevant. What am I trying to achieve and/or what is interesting to the person I'm talking to?
So words are our first opportunity to connect our thoughts to actions.
Welcome back. We're glad that you've joined us for ReedFlections, a podcast on life, leadership, and learning. I'm Mark Calderon. I'll be steering us through our podcast today. I'm here with our friend Reed Nyffeler. Reed, your husband, your father. You're a CEO of a large, growing global franchise organization. You give your time and your talent and your treasure to a lot of different community organizations and individuals throughout the U.S. and around the world. Your personal and professional experiences you want to share with those eager to live a life on purpose. Now, episodes 1 through 4 were about priorities. We talked a lot about priorities. Now we're talking about developing habits, which is the actual kind of where the rubber meets the road, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, last episode, we talked about good thoughts to help develop good habits. Again, this is internal, but now we're talking about the importance of clear communication and well-crafted words. So in other words, all these thoughts you have sometimes are running around at 100 miles an hour. How do you put those into words, and why do they matter in a leadership position?
Yeah, and so I think words are where the trap starts, right? Because in our thoughts, it's a singular. It's only us.
Mm-hmm.
We're in our minds. In words, now we have an audience.
Yeah.
And we can choose the best words for the wrong audience, and we can have the worst words for the right audience. And so now there's a reaction we're going to get to that. So if we say something and that word is not received well, then it'll create self-doubt. And so that creates a bad feedback loop that we're not looking for. And so words and crafted communication are super critical. And so I'll give an example. I remember one of the greatest orators, especially on the TV generation, was John F. Kennedy.
Right.
In fact, he many believe was elected because of his ability to communicate,
Mm-hmm.
and that the TV is sitting in front of everyone's sets there was him communicating. However,
it was new at the time.
It was
right?
new at the
Yeah.
time, and he was a great communicator,
Uh-huh.
and made for TV. However, he had a huge slip up, and so he was in Berlin, and he thought, you know what, I'll use their language so that I can relate to them.
German.
And he was a speaker; he wanted to speak in German, right? And so he said, "Ich bin ein Berliner." And he said, I am also a person that aligns with Berlin. That was what he's intending to say. However, what he said was, I am a chocolate donut. I mean, some people love those. So ironically, that actually ingratiated him to the audience.
Oh, yeah.
Even though he misspoke, because he intended to say, hey, I'm also with you. I side with you as a Berliner. Instead, it says, I'm a chocolate donut. And so that was humorous to the group and said, hey, this guy can make fun of himself and kind of move on. And he's attempting to be like us, but he's clearly not. And so you can see that he was communicating words, but what was also more important was his actions associated with that word. Because what we say is only about 20% roughly of what is communicated. How we say it, our voice inflection, our body language, our facial expression are really communicating that, right? And so if we say something with positive intent, we're going to be more optimistic and say, hey, what are you doing? Right? The words will be the same. What are you doing? And you can say, I said the exact same thing, but it was received in two different ways. And that's why words can be a trap.
Right.
And clear communication is critical. Because if I said, what are you doing? I'm asking that as a friend or hey, how's it going? Instead of, what are you doing? Now I'm inspecting. Accusatory, right? Yeah. And so that's why words can be a trap. And if we have negative intent and negative thoughts, as we talked about last episode, we're going to be that, what are you doing? And to be misinterpreted. However, we have positive intent. Hey, what are you doing? Right? That is the same words and it's there. So words can be a trap and they can lead to self-doubt and thoughts. But more importantly, we're going to leverage words to then accomplish our priorities around that. And so words are highly powerful and you have to really think about what you're saying and how you're saying it in order to accomplish your goals.
I remember as a young man, I just graduated high school and I was still living at home. And I had a couple of little part-time jobs, and I was kind of going to school part-time, and really didn't have any focus, didn't have any vision. was just kind of existing. I was living at home. I had no rent, refrigerator always filled with food, and my dad used some words with me. My father, he said, son, you can't keep doing this. He says, you need to make a decision. This is not sustainable, and you need to essentially grow up to be a man and be an adult. It was at that time I joined the Army. And I've had that conversation with him since. He's still alive, my dad, good health. He's in his 80s. And I said, Dad, you know what? If you hadn't had those words with me, I'd probably still be living with you. He's like, oh, no.
Well,
but tell us a little bit about why leaders need to be careful about their words, need to craft words and be conscious of how their words are perceived and how they deliver those words.
yeah, and I think it's really the essence of this podcast is for life, leadership, and learning. And words are the thing that draws all those together, right? So our life, as your life is better because your dad wanted to have those words. It was better because he had that conversation with you. And I think so many times we're afraid to have that
Right.
conversation. And if we look at that and your dad would say, and let's use your story, okay, I can have this conversation with Art. He may not like me.
Right.
He may self-doubt. He may not think it's good.
It'll be
Circumstantially,
conflict.
it'll be conflict. I should
Yeah.
avoid those words. Instead, he empathized, right? So we avoid words because we're sympathetic. We will have hard conversations like that because we empathize. He empathized and said, you know what, Art, you're not going to live a life of your priorities if you do not move out and go become an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Sympathetically, I can say, hey, you've had a hard childhood, whatever. And then, you know what, I'll encourage you in this bad spot. But he empathized and said, you know what, I am his father. I need to have the conversation with him, and I need to use my ability, authority, role to share my words. Same in leadership, right? Is I, as a leader, need to empathize with the person I'm trying to develop. Now, they may not like the words I'm sharing because it doesn't say, just stay here, watch TV, and play video games all day. Art, you'll be okay. Would you like me to bring you some snacks? Right? That's probably what you wanted as a
Oh,
teenager.
love that.
That would have
Yeah.
been awesome, right? You know, what we want to do is empathize. And that's how we use words as a leader. We say, okay, and here's what I would do as a leader. And even in life, I would say in life too, and in leadership, and ultimately in learning. What are you trying to achieve? Going back to the priorities. Your dad knew that you would never have, your priority would not be to be non-productive in your entire life, right? You wanted to ultimately have a family, et cetera, et cetera. So he's saying, I am going to, as a leader in your life, have a conversation with you that'll directionally take you that further. And that's when you enrolled in the Army in your case. And so I think the same thing as a leader. So what do I try to do is I try to understand where that person's priorities are, and they may not be the same as mine, maybe they are, and then work in words using my choice of language and the way that I deliver that information and really the time and place, right? If we're in a crowded room and you were with your siblings and everything else and your entire family member, and he came to you and you said, Art, you can't be sitting on the couch the rest of your life. Would that have that same impact? And he said, hey, I mean, it's just you and I, and we're sitting at the dinner table, and I'm not going to accept you forever doing that. So when we look at words and clear communication, it's also environment and circumstances. And so as a leader, I'm very cognizant of that, right? Knowing that I need to have these conversations in certain environments that are going to transform lives. And that's what words can do and the way they're communicated. So now, you know, that's a very difficult way to communicate and think about words if you're just getting started, right? Because now we're talking about individuals that we're interacting with on a regular level. So let's break it down in some simple step we can take right out of the gate. If we're intending to improve our life, leadership, and learning, and we're just getting started really being thoughtful around our words, where should we start? That starts with our priorities. So again, we started with our thoughts and positive intent. Now we want to communicate that positive intent. So, you know, as we talk about my priorities, my first priority was faith, and my second priority is family. And so in order to start a family, I realized I needed a significant other. And so that's something that I realized I had to do. And so then I'm like, I got to recruit someone else to walk alongside me. I mean, like, you know,
Recruit's a good way to look
yeah,
at it.
because I mean, they're not going to run to this. You know what I mean? I have that challenge early in my career as I had some self-doubt in life, et cetera. So I thought, okay, what's my only tool? Maybe my words. And so, you know, as a teenager, first of all, I had a sister that's about 5 or 6 years younger. So all I knew was guys. I mean, as an example, you know, I met my wife and she was the sister of my best friend. I'd been over to his house multiple times, and then it was a particular May afternoon, and he goes, we're hanging out, and he goes, I got to go. I said, you got to go? And he goes, yeah, I got to go home because my sister's home from college. I said, I thought you were an only child. He goes, didn't you see any of the family photos? They were on the wall. I mean, this is how oblivious I was. I'm just giving you context, right? So I didn't even look at the family photos, nor did we ever have any conversation. I mean, I'm talking about sports and other things that were of interest. So that's how far I had to come, right? And so I was not there and never asked a girl out on a date or any of that other stuff. And so then I'm like, well, now what do I do? You know? So then
This is before there's a podcast to look up.
yeah,
and-
there was no dating apps at the
nothing.
time, right? There's no podcast of life, leadership, and learning. And my priority I'd already established at the time
How
that
did you
was
do it?
faith, and then it was family. And so so then you know, I had met Dana, who's now my wife, and I realized that this is somebody I wanted to date. And then I'm like, now what do I say? Right? So the thought was there. It's like I had some confidence, a lot of self-doubt, right? That's an opportunity for self-doubt. I said, all right, build up my confidence, right? Going back to our thoughts on the previous one. And then I said, now it's the words. And you know, I'm maybe more of a confident communicator now. And she will tell you at that time, I was like, never really looked anybody in the eye. I was like, what are you doing Friday? And then she's like, you're a little young. I was like, well.
You were younger than her.
Yeah, 2 years
yeah.
younger. I was like, well, I'm getting older. I mean, I don't know what answer you'd have to that one. I mean, I don't know. Every day I'm a day older. I don't know. And so I thought after that first time, she's like, sure. And then, so I thought, okay, great. I got the first date, and we go on that first date. And then, you know, pretty soon after about a couple of different days, she's like, you know what? I mean, you're just not a good conversation. Like, work on my words, right? And so right there, we begin to say, okay, my goal is to have a family. And so towards my priorities, and then it goes back to who am I, right? My priorities. And so I said, okay, in order to have someone alongside me in this path of my family, which is what I was crafting my words towards, faith was a principal component. I knew that I wanted a family built on a foundation of faith. And so then I started integrating those conversations, because once you get past those surface conversations we typically have with different people and say, hey, who are you? Where do you work? And where did you grow up and everything else? Now, what's your next conversation? And many people have not developed their thoughts enough to have those second conversations that lead to deeper conversations.
Yeah, that's true.
And so after those first couple of dates, I realized, okay, I really need to come with a series of thoughts and questions. I mean, I can't just be talking about, what'd you do today? And how was the last 5 years of your life that we talked about before? You know, how was your last year of college, whatever. And so then you're thinking, okay, if I'm working towards my priority, how do I build on the conversation and words going forward? Now, this principle also applies in leadership, right? And so if we just meet someone, and maybe you're somebody that, you know, you go in and you're a great networker, and you go in and you can read them your business card. Hey, I'm Reed, and I own this business, and I've been working and owned it for 17 years, whatever the case might be. Well, then what do you go from there? Right? Because now we've crafted that words, but we're just an acquaintance. However, are we really going to achieve our priorities if we only have acquaintance level relationships and we only use our words to build our acquaintance? So if our goal is to make progress in work, using another analogy, how do we take that to the next level? So we have second level questions. Said, okay, great. Now, after we have that, and this might be a tip for some of you that are working on your words, once we've identified our business card or LinkedIn profile or things they could find about us, how do we see that we connect? So words are our first opportunity to connect our thoughts to actions. And so once you've introduced yourself and you began the conversation, words are designed to connect. So if you look at
words, some connect with the individual that you're talking to.
Correct.
Okay.
So how do you build relationships with words as a leader? Is you connect to the audience. So I have positive intent. I use words towards my priority, again, in the case of my wife or in a business context. Then I find a way that we connect. And if we leave those conversations where there was a connection, we said, that was a great conversation. It's never about the topic. People think it's about the topic. The topic is only relevant or irrelevant for the sake of the connection. Because, you know, someone may have a huge interest in the topic at hand and another person may not. So it's not about the topic. It's about the relevant topic to connect to that audience. And so if we're thinking of our words, and this is where it's important with regard to words, what is relevant to the goal or the audience? Because those are the two things we're trying to connect, the goal and the audience.
So you're not just talking about what you want to talk about.
That's right.
You're talking about what is relevant. What am I trying to achieve, and or what is interesting to the person I'm talking to?
So I'll give two examples. One, the words were trying to connect your dad to you, and his priority was you get a job, right? So if he were there, he's saying, my priority is my son doesn't live with me forever. And I want him to have a good life. And I'm going to connect him to that priority, right? So he used his words in that environment. And his words were, hey, Art, you can't stay on the couch forever. Go get a job. Okay, that's perfect. Accomplish the goal because you're enrolled in the military right afterwards. Now, in my case, my priorities were build a family, right? And I had an audience, Dana, that I needed to connect with, and my words weren't working. And so then I evaluate. I said, okay, next time we're on the second, third, fourth date, I need to think of something that would foster a connection. So what is the best way to connect? It's you orient with the past, you connect to the future.
Okay.
So for example, when you meet someone, you say, hey, where are you from? That's the past. Oh, I'm from Omaha. I'm from Omaha. I've been to Omaha. We orient to the past. Perfect. Now we connect to the future. Hey, where are you going? Oh, let's say you meet someone at the airport, right? And you're on a flight with them from Omaha, in our case, to say Minneapolis. Oh, are you from Omaha? First natural conversation you have with a plane. Yeah, I'm from Omaha. Oh, where are you going? Connect to the future.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm going to this location, et cetera, et cetera. And you connect to the future. And so then if you know that you're leveraging words for connection to the future, you will then think about how can we connect in the future? And so then I had questions, said, okay, going back to my analogy with my wife. Hey, what are you trying to achieve in your life? What are your priorities? What is your future predetermined in your life there? And as soon as I started asking those questions, I began to learn about future. And then I would find ways we could connect, right? And so let's use that in a business context. They read you their LinkedIn profile, and that's their past. It orients you, right? Now you talk about how can we build a relationship going forward, right? So in our business, we're in franchising. And so I asked them, who are you? Why are you here? And what are your plans for this year?
Those are the 3 steps.
Those are the 3 steps. Yeah. Orientation, history, who are you? Where are you from? Why are you here today? Where are you going? Connection. And so again, if we just ask those 3 simple questions in our words, and we choose those words very intentionally, right? And they're very short questions by design. One, because I can't remember long lines, right? I'd have to read from a script or something. But I can remember short questions, and then they're a reminder for me when I choose my words to go forward from that. Then, if you're, maybe that's the first start for the audience saying, I've never really thought about what I'm saying. Well, think about, okay, I'm orienting to them. What's the past? What connected us in the present? And then we really, truly connect emotionally, and we want to spend time with someone that we can connect in the future, right? Because, using my analogy with my wife, because I connected in that conversation, like, well, this is someone that seems to be going the direction that I want to go. Now,
and you think she realized that too? Oh, he's kind of going in that direction that I'm going, so I'm still interested to get together again, have another day.
Yeah, and so I'll be candid and open. I mean, that lasted for 60 days, to be honest, because the summer ended, right? And then she went back to college and to a different direction.
Yeah.
And so we have to look at connection, and this is every relationship in life, right? Is this a connection on a flight that I land and get a story and move on, or a connection for life, right? And so that has to organize back to our priorities. And so then I recognized, okay, in the moment, we were connected and she wanted to have subsequent dates, but then circumstances drew us apart, right? And so in those circumstances, then I said, okay, now the environment's changed. And this is where words also have impact. And so I realized I couldn't be sitting there at a dinner with her to have a discussion. And so then my communication went to written form. And there's benefits and traps with that, because I think, when we look at words, we communicate in all sorts of ways. We communicate face to face like we're doing now. We may text someone. We may send an email to someone.
And the
Snapchat, right? Or it may be, Morse code or smoke signals, I guess, depending on how we communicate.
Yeah.
But if I simply go back to what are you doing? And I put that in different contexts, it can really be that positive or negative intent of the receiver. So I have to understand the disposition of the receiver. And so our words can be invalidated in another format. So if we have a conversation and we're having a conversation, that conversation went great. But I said, what are you doing in a text? You're like, who does he think that he can ask me what I'm doing? And it's a form of judgment. And so then it comes back down to credibility. Well, if we don't have that previous connection and then the words come in, we can take negative intent in that regard. And so words matter, and so does context and circumstances. So it was that second stage of a relationship that I understood the power of written word. And that's a tool of leaders and a tool of learning.
So you're saying you wrote her letters?
Correct. So I wrote her,
Wow.
actually, in this case, 100 plus letters. And
this is back in the old days, right?
This is where you had snail mail and the stamps
Yeah.
were 25 cents. Now they're much more expensive, right? And there's other means. But regardless of that, what it taught me is that, you know what? If our relationship in our family or in work are exclusively around one thing, right? So, one of the key tenets of my career has been sales. And so some salespeople are great just sitting in front of the client.
Mhm.
Get me in front of the client, I'm great.
Right.
Well, the whole sales process isn't just sitting in front of the client, right? As a leader, my whole defining moment of a leader isn't just my keynote presentation at a convention, right? It's my communication one-on-one. It's my communication in an email. It's my communication. All those have words. And so if I only understand words in one context, communication, I am going to hold back my development as a life.
You're going to limit it.
I'm going to limit it,
Yeah.
right? And so that's where then the next is the written communication, and just using that analogy of my family life, because certainly in my work life, it was the same case. In fact, I'll even give an example in my sales career, because it could be even more relevant to some audiences here. I remember one of the first things jobs that I had in high school was telemarketing. And so many times, and if you start with a telemarketing job, you have a script and you're reading the script. And I was like, I would never say these words in a script. That's just not my personality or who I am. And then I sat there and I thought, what is my priority? In that moment, it was to get someone to switch to AT&T from Sprint, actually, or vice versa. It didn't really matter, long distance. And so the script, the outcome of that success was getting them to say, yes, I would like to switch my long distance service from AT&T to Sprint or vice versa. It didn't really matter. And so I said, the script is designed to get me to that outcome. However, if I understand the purpose and the process, then I can enter into my own words.
Right.
And so what I began to do is I was making 20, 30 calls an hour. And so each call, I would evaluate every word I chose. I would say, hello, is Art there? Yes, this is Art. Great, Art, how are you doing today? Instead of saying, I'm here to sell you and switch you from AT&T to Sprint. Why? Because I'd orient. And then I would connect, right? That's the purpose of the words. And so then I saw what worked and what didn't work. And I also saw the time to make that adjustment. And so by volume of calls as a 14, 15, 16-year-old, I could understand the power of words in the moment. And pretty soon what happened was I had metrics. We had metrics associated with it. So if I had one call out of 50 that turned into a conversion, and then it became 1 out of 25 and 1 out of 10, now you're not going to get everybody. But I saw that the only thing that changed were the words, because it's just another phone number, another person. And you can see the power of words. And so that was a spoken word, right?
Right.
Then we look at, say, written emails. As a salesperson, we get inundated with emails, right? What are the emails we responded to? And as I reflected back, I'd say, what did I respond to? And I can leave that to timing, that maybe, I need a plumber, so this plumber's ad's right there at the right time. Or I can leave that as, something that catches attention, right? So what is the Nike theme?
Just do it.
You pulled that out of that. What does that associate with tennis shoes, right?
Right.
But the word choice there was so well crafted, it became part of our vernacular.
Right. Right.
What's Reebok's tagline?
I have no idea.
Me neither, because there was no crafted words. So if we're going to choose our words, just do it. Let's choose words that'll be memorable and portable, right? If those words are memorable and portable, we can use them and they make progress towards our priorities.
Well, that was the second of 5 episodes where you will focus on habits we need to live a life on purpose. Bring us home now and wrap this up for us and talk us a little bit more about words and why they're important, especially in leadership.
Yeah. So like I said, in leadership, as a leader, I think there's a difference between a manager and a leader. And I think it's important to land this point, because then our words will be crafted as a manager or a leader. As a leader, we're here to develop others. If our words are crafted well, our objective is to develop others, and so they can achieve the development. And so first, it's that disposition. So many people use their words in a leadership capacity to manage. I'm expecting this of you, and you need to do that. Going back to your dad's story, I'm expecting you to pay $1,000 a month rent. That's a management conversation. Instead of leadership conversation, and I don't want you to live here forever, I want you to build a better life. That's a development conversation, right? Yeah. And so given that circumstance, you could say, you need to start paying rent, management conversation, instead of saying, I want you to go get a job and be an adult.
Right, which, maybe I would have paid rent, but I would have missed out on a life lesson that was much more important.
So if we're in a leadership context, we need to make sure that our language is leadership driven, not management driven. If we consider ourselves a leader, that's influence, right? And our influence as a leader is to develop and transform. And so then we say, what language would be a conversation that would transform and develop? And so then we choose words accordingly, right? And so now, certainly if we hear leaders and maybe people look at my life and say, I'd like to do X, Y, and Z. Great. That could be your aspiration. However, the missing piece to that is not the destination, it's the starting point. And so that's where we orient towards. So, hey, if someone wants to be a leader and they're at me, where can they start? Well, first, let's orient. Where are you at in life? Are you in your teens and you need to change your thought life like I was? Or are you just dating and you need to change your words like I was? Or maybe you're later in life. So that's the orientation, the first thing. And then we connect in the moment and ultimately to the outcome. So that's what a leader should do, is understand the audience, right? And so as a leader, we first understand the audience. No matter where I'm going, even with this podcast, I'm thinking, who is the intended audience and what in their stage of life would be the most appropriate for me to communicate and use my words to transform their life so they can develop, because that's my intent. The audience is likely people that want to be better, that tomorrow they want to wake up and be a better version of themselves. And hopefully this audience accepts that they are the only person holding themselves back.
Outstanding.
And so I'm crafting words for that person that's a self-starter, that wants a better life and recognizes it's nothing anyone else is going to give them. It's something they need to do that. So I am choosing my words to help them remember in their lives that, you know what, I can make that choice for myself, and I can choose the words I'm choosing that will ultimately draw in an audience and help them develop. And if we work to develop others, then ultimately we'll be developed in the process.
Well, very good. Thanks again, Reed, for helping us develop strong habits and helping us to remember the value of clear and well-crafted communication and words to drive our actions. Thank you, listeners, for joining us here on ReedFlections, a podcast on life, leadership, and learning. Next time, the habit of taking action. I'm Art Calderon. Until then, be purposeful.
And as you love, Art, this is our last word, and we realize words are tough. So if you're there and you don't even know where to start, listen to what you're saying to yourself and others. Just listen to the words you're sharing and say, is that accomplishing the goal? Just like I did in that telemarketing example. Is the words accomplishing my priorities? And then adjust a handful of words. Adjust the sentences. After you adjust the sentences, practice your delivery. How are you communicating that? And voice inflection, and then continue to build from there. So start with what you're saying today, look at it, and make sure it's leading towards your priorities. That's the place to start. See you next week.